Hello, and welcome to Nosotros, the podcast that explores all things San Antonio, all things political, and all things cultural. Thanks for joining us. I'm Elena Ayala, your host and a Metro columnist for the Express News. My guests today are Rebeca Maria Barrera and Merri Longoria. Remember that, Longoria. Gutierrez. They're rock stars in the field of education and curriculum development, in cultural exchange and understanding. They've traveled through Mexico and Latin America together. I'm so envious. Interviewing artisans of all kinds. Both began as classroom teachers and grew into careers in publishing. They're co-founders of a unique educational nonprofit called Somos Cultura y Más, which they'll talk about today, and are the masterminds of the local El Día de los Niños celebration, which is just around the corner, and celebrating a big birthday in San Antonio. They'll fill us in. Their resumes are so dense, I can only mention a bit of both of them. Rebeca, or Becky, was the lead author of Amanecer, the first bilingual curriculum for Head Start, nationally, correct? And the Scholastic Early Childhood Workshop, adopted by more than 75% of Texas and California pre-K programs. She founded the National Latino Children's Institute and was there for a decade, and was the force behind the creation of what we'll talk about today, El Día de los Niños, celebrating young Americans, now a national event in more than 200 U.S. cities and communities. She served on the board of directors of the global publisher Scholastic for 13 years and was its director of Latino initiatives for 8 years. She's a 10th generation Texan, and she's executive director of Somos. Merri Gutierrez has worked for various educational entities, including the Region Education Services Center, the Economy Company, Silver Burdette, Scholastic, Perfection Learning, and Santillana Publishing. She developed curriculum for grades K through 8, state adoptions, parent literacy programs, and summer English as a second language programs. She has directed Ballet Folklórico and is an 11th generation Tejana who serves as the culturista for Somos. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
There's so much to get to, especially about the upcoming Dia de los Niños, but I'm fascinated about your family stories. So I want to start there. Becky, your family has Texas roots that go back 10 generations.
That's right.
Tell us about your family and the rancho your family still has.
So during the Escandon settlement, one of my ancestors, Capitan Jose Vázquez Borrego, was given a plot of land near what is now Zapata, called Dolores. Dolores was the name of the land piece. And that's where he brought many families, like 20 families, and they settled that area and the area surrounding nearby Laredo and all of that in the 1700s. So we have that legacy in our family. And my father always told us about it when we were children. But the interesting thing is we never learned any of that in school. And it wasn't until I was at Hemisphere and saw my grandfather's name on the wall as one of the original settlers of Texas.
Oh my God, that gives me chills.
That's when I understood it.
Wow.
That's when I understood, and it was at the Institute of Texan Cultures. And the other thing that was marvelous for me about Hemisphere, I was a teenager at the time, and because I was bilingual, I was given a job of a VIP tour guide. Very fun way to spend your summer.
Oh, what?
Oh, yeah. Movie
great
stars and presidents
job.
and governors all the time. But that was also the first time that I realized that being bilingual was something magical and special, because before it had only been something with my family, and we were still punished in school for speaking Spanish. And every class that I ever was in, teachers had us pronounce our names differently. So you grow up thinking you're Barrera, not Barrera. And you don't even know that the word Barrera means barrier, and that, beautiful bullfights have that barrier, that Barrera.
Awesome.
You don't know any of that because our history was never taught.
That's
Hence
right.
why we're doing this today.
I want to ask about Longoria.
Oh, yeah.
And that you're an 11th You beat her by one generation.
I think we were just a little more busy.
It was the same time period
Because
the same
it
explorers,
was
same
actually
settlements.
right before hers. They got here a little bit earlier in the 1720s. 1726. But
1726.
yes.
Okay, that's the thing. When you hear that year and think 1776, and
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it really puts things in perspective and shows us how little of our history we did learn
Absolutely.
everywhere in the country.
Absolutely.
So tell us about 1720 what?
6.
Okay.
That's when we were first documented on this continent. But the story that I think you're asking about is, yes, there are all those generations, and very different from Becky. I didn't learn this stuff in school either, but my mother went genealogy searching before internet. So she was walking in courthouses to get marriage certificates, birth certificates, death certificates. She'd go to churches and get baptismal.
Yes.
She was going through cemeteries, getting dates. She did all of this on, the
Real.
old-fashioned
It was
way.
real, yeah.
and she found all these fabulous stories. And one of them, I have done research on her, and since then, she's known, if you Google Texas' first cattle queen, Texas's first cattle queen, but she was around before, she died before it was Texas.
And what was her name?
Her name was Rosa Maria Hinojosa de Bahí. And either through marriage or by grants or land grants or by inheritance, or she outright bought land. If you think of where Rio Grande City is, all the way down to where Brownsville is, over 1 million acres, north and south of the river, okay? Because it wasn't a border at that time, okay? It was just the river. And she had, at each of the ranches, she raised cattle and sheep and so forth. And at each of the ranches, she built a chapel or a church. And so she was the documented godmother of over 300 children. Wow. And so she oversaw all this land, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
patrona.
she was always out on the range with a big hat and feathers, big old plumes, and they would see her and they'd say, "Allá va la patrona," because she was known as the boss lady. And she also had her skirts cut so she could ride the horse astride as opposed to side saddle. And so she was a real cattle woman.
Wow.
Okay? And she was married twice and had 2 sets of kids, and one of them grew up to be a priest. And that priest, can you imagine, in his little wagon with his friend helper? And
Como sufrir.
They go from ranchito to ranchito
Yes.
to do a wedding here, to do a baptism here, to do, funeral here, all these things, for so long. But she sat with him and she told him, "Mijito, I love you, but I can't give you any of the good land because you're not going to have any heirs."
Did he leave the priesthood?
No. She gave him the island.
Oh, that's the Bahí.
The Padre Island. Padre Island.
Padre Island.
Nicolás.
Oh, man,
Nicolás
this is
Bahí.
Nicolás Bahí.
Oh,
It's a good
my
story.
God. Such a good story. But tell us, before we go start about, because I want to start about Dia de los Niños, but tell us about the Longoria in your name.
Okay, the Longoria, one of her children, granddaughters, married Juan Miguel Longoria. Okay, there were 2 of them in different generations, but the first one. And he has a historical marker down in Bluetown. It's like 1 signal light and 2 blocks.
It's in South Texas.
Down by Weslaco and all those. And so in Bluetown, they built a historical marker to him because he is credited with giving all the sequias, all the irrigation system that's down in South Texas. That's why we have everything growing down there,
That's
because
right.
of the irrigation system. And he brought that from northern Spain, where he was from, and they grew grapes.
And that Longoria also got us to a very famous Longoria, correct?
Yes. I think you're thinking of my prima.
Eva Longoria Baston.
Eva, yes. Eva is, in the lineage, one of her greats, I don't know if it's 4 or 5 back, maybe 6, but his name is Pedro Longoria, and he's a brother to one of...
Oh, okay. So there's son primas.
Son primas.
Todos somos
Todos somos primos. That's
somos.
right. Yeah. Especially during fiesta, man. Oh, my God. You got to watch it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that, you know what she told us about the acequias, that's the kind of history we've been missing in our schools.
Absolutely.
The contributions that those early families made, building the roads, bringing the cattle industry, the whole vaquero thing.
Vaquero thing.
They were discussing the charros. Well, you know, the charros were the original cowboys. Yeah. And so there you have it.
There you have it.
As opposed to the mariachi, which was a little bit more...
Yeah. Yeah. The biggest insult to a charro is to be mistaken for a mariachi.
Are you a mariachi?
The biggest insult to a charro is to be called a mariachi. Okay, even though I love mariachis. Tell us the who, what, when, and why of Dia de los Niños, which is coming up soon.
Okay, the who, what, when, and why. The who is Dia de los Niños. It is for children, and I'm talking up to 86, okay?
Okay.
Because there is a need to celebrate children for who they are. You have birthdays, you have secretaries' days, you have, teacher day, you have grandparents' day, but you have birthdays are one thing, but to have a children's day, that's what this is. And Becky can tell you a little bit more about that.
But it's, tell us, it's May 6th.
The festival, Dia de los Niños Festival, is going to be held May 6th. It's usually, traditionally on April 30th, but that conflicted with Fiesta this year, and it's on a Sunday, and we didn't want to do that because we didn't want people
we
to
actually
feel
do
torn.
have a festival on the 30th.
Yeah, that's a different
Park,
one.
but it's a 1-week celebration. We'll talk about that.
Okay, let's. So it's 9 to 3 p.m. at Plaza Guadalupe.
9 to 2 at Plaza Guadalupe, and there will be performers there. You'll see mariachi. You'll see dancers. You'll see the Native Americans. They'll be bringing the Indians in for a blessing. We're going to have a children's parade, and the children's parade is fabulous. And our headliner is going to be a lady by the name of Tish Hinojosa, San Antonio's own Tish Hinojosa. And Tish she wrote a song 25 years ago called Cada Niño, and it praises children. So we're going to have some school choirs come in, and they're going to sing with her Cada Niño.
Oh,
and
how beautiful.
Then they'll have a show.
And she's a singer-songwriter, a folk singer.
From the West Side.
From the West Side, and another San Antonian with deep Texas roots. And this is free, isn't it?
It's all free, and everything that they get to participate in is it's all free. And they will do things. There are activities, art activities, like making the binding on a book, making a book, and this one look at how the Aztecs did it with a piece of twig to put it there. They'll be learning about repujado, which is a beautiful art form and the kids do it with foil. Okay?
Oh, yeah, it's lovely.
And then we have activity cards that give you the history on what it is, and so you can go home and share it with your nephews.
So you're learning
nieces.
about a cultural tradition that maybe you didn't know about,
and
or you had seen but not really fully know.
No, you see the huichol art, with the yarn, and sometimes they do it with beads and stuff like that and wax. The kids will do that.
It's beautiful.
Using a picture from the codex. See, that's what she's doing right there. Yeah. I mean, the Ojo de Dios, the symbolism, they'll learn the symbolism behind the Ojo de Dios. So all of the activities, there's
are cultural.
So many.
Yeah.
Yep.
Becky, this didn't just happen. It has this holiday, this celebration has a very long history and has very deep Mexican origins. Talk about that and how you came to first introduce the celebration and where. There's the San Antonio story origin there, and how it's grown across the country.
So at the time, I was the executive director of the National Latino Children's Institute. And one of the things that we were charged with by students who had come to our conferences was that they wanted to find a way to express themselves, to have leadership roles, and to be recognized for the role that they would play in the future. They felt that no one ever asked them what was important to them, what were their dreams, what were their plans for the future. And so, and I was in Austin at the time. That's where the organization's headquarters was. But we decided, I had been in San Antonio, of course, for all the 40 years before that, or however many years there were, 30 years before that. And I knew that San Antonio would be the easiest place to figure out how to bring attention to young Latinos, because remember, it was the National Latino Children's Institute. And so our goal was to uplift young Latinos. That's what they needed. They told us in all of the focus groups that they felt they were only represented on television as gang members, as school dropouts, as problems with immigration, and nobody ever pronounced their names correctly.
As housekeepers. I mean, that is the role that you always saw.
And so these young people said, you know, we're more important than that. And consider that we didn't even have a Jesse Trevino painting in the Smithsonian at the time. This is so 25 years ago. So having been born in Laredo and knowing the culture of living in a border town city, or what we call the borderlands, which is from Monterrey to San Antonio, we sort of knew there would be that there was a cultural way to uplift children. And the idea for this particular holiday to be embraced and adopted by the United States was born as a result of a little book reading and book festival that an author that Scholastic had in their catalog. Her name was Pat Mora. She's a librarian from
El Paso,
an author, and worked with the libraries in El Paso. And so on Dia del Niño, which is on the border, she decided to do a book reading at the library and tell everybody, vamos a tener Dia de los Libros. So I knew Pat because her books were at Scholastic, where Merri was working. And I was on the board of Scholastic. So I called Merri and I said, you know,
can we get Pat?
We could get Pat. And through another friend, Oralia Garza Cortez, from a librarian who was running the children's section here at the library in San Antonio, we connected with Pat.
And the wife of Ernie Cortez.
And the wife of Ernie Cortez, another great San Antonian, right? So we decided we would bring these groups together. So Oralia and Pat Mora and myself, and we got Scholastic to agree to sponsor her and give away books. And we said, but let's do more than Dia del Libro, because San Antonio, we were right there we were going to hold the first festival at Main Plaza, which didn't look like it does now. But so the idea, and we knew that it was a Mexican holiday because both Pat and I had border life. So we went to the consul, and the consul said, bravísimo, vamos a hacerlos juntos, you know. He wanted it to be together. So that's how the first one was born. And McDonald's Corporation stepped up from one of our board members and helped us build this momentum with the city. And so the first festival was here. Mayor Howard Peak was the first mayor. And our sponsor through the whole thing was a brand new young city council member who had just been elected the previous year. His name is Jose Menendez.
Oh, wow. That's such history here.
Who grew up becoming now our senator. So that was the first festival. And because of our national connection, visitors came from Puerto Rico, Chicago, Los Angeles, Washington, everywhere, to learn how we were going to do it and how we were going to create a cultural holiday to uplift the children, and how they could turn around and go back to their city and recreate it. And so that's how it started.
But tell us a little bit about how this holiday was born in Mexico. So there's a connection there. Yeah. How long has Mexico been celebrating?
Mexico has been celebrating since 1925. And it's a big deal. Kids don't go to school on that day. They have carnavales and festivales of all different kinds. But of course, for them, learning their culture is not a secret. It's not something hard.
Yes.
For us, that was the intention of our festival was, yes, we would have fun, but we would not just be doing arts and crafts and having fun dances and entertainment. It would have to have a cultural, historical flavor so that we would grow up knowing what we didn't learn about ourselves.
But you know what? Those festivals in Mexico, you go and here you go to a festival and you have cotton candy and you have candy apples and you have all this kind of stuff. The carts that they put the cotton candy in where they stick them all in and they're all wrapped up and all that. Okay, they have that, but instead of cotton candy, there are little monitos like this and a little paintbrush and a palette of paints. And so that the kids can go home and paint.
Oh,
and
so
they
it's
do
all
it like that was in Oaxaca. So they teach them the tradition of the alebrije style of painting.
So in San Antonio, we're marking a big number.
The 25th anniversary.
This is the 25th anniversary of the Dia de los Niños celebration in San Antonio. And it's no surprise to me that it started here in the Mexican-American cultural capital of the United States.
Exactly.
And now it's in how many places now?
Well, after that first year, we went to the Senate, U.S. Senate by invitation of our own elected representatives at the time, and I think at the time we had Orrin Hatch, Ted Kennedy, Tom Daschle, and John McCain. Four bipartisan.
That's a good group.
Power group, right?
Yes.
None of them are there anymore, but all four of them.
And neither are those kind of political moves.
And many of them spoke Spanish. We didn't have a Hispanic senator, so we had to go to an Anglo senator to get us to declare the holiday in the U.S. Senate, which is where the commemorative holidays for the United States are born. That's where
the whole name is El Día de los Niños, celebrating young Americans.
Yeah,
and celebrating young Americans allows you to transfer that word into many languages, which is what they did at the Chicago Public Schools, because they had children of many, many different countries. And that's how the development of the growing of it and how it's become easy for so many groups to embrace the holiday, even though they're not Mexican American.
That's right.
So in your community, you might be learning how to write your name in Chinese symbols. In another community, you might be learning the history of, music from the Arkansas area. Wherever the festival is held.
It takes on its own
flavor.
Community flavor.
But
it's
roots.
Dia de los Niños, celebrating young Americans.
I love it.
Yeah.
It's congratulations on this, Becky. I mean, a lot of work over many decades for the both of you.
Well, and having met Merri as she was a corporate executive, having corporate partners makes all the difference when you're starting an idea like that among nonprofits, because they have buying power, they have media power, and Scholastic was the world's largest publisher. They immediately put articles.
It was for children, so
and they put articles into their magazines and they made a poster for us that went to every school in the country. That's the way we built the momentum. It was really great fun.
Yeah. Good synergy.
Yeah.
The work that you both do for child and family, children and families in this event really stems from your professional work as teachers, curriculum creators, and producers of cultural education.
True.
In these kits that you might show us today. Merri, what drives you to do this work?
Well, I've always been an advocate for bilingual biculturalism and getting as much of that out there as possible. So that voice has been strong. When my daughter was born, of course, I wanted to preserve that because my mother did it with me. We spoke Spanish and English. The rule in the house was if I speak to you in English, you respond in English. Hablo en español. Respuesta en español. That was just the rule. Okay. So it was and when I came home one day when I was in junior high, and I said to her, I don't want to speak Spanish anymore because none of the popular kids speak Spanish.
Oh my God.
Okay. So don't talk to me in Spanish anymore. And my mother said, ven para acá.
Oh God, that's scary.
and she was crocheting, and I'll never forget. She stopped and she put it down, and she picked up a piece of yarn. She cut it, and she said, "Dame la mano." And I put my hand out, and she wrapped it around my wrist. And then she says, "All right, turn around." And I turned around. She tied it to my belt loop. You know how your jeans
Oh
have?
my God.
A ver cómo pasas el día.
Oh, without
With
just
only one hand.
with
Let's
only
see how
one,
you can do
yeah,
it.
only with
Okay?
one hand.
So I was always very proud and aware. Okay, and got a lot of that from my mother. I mean, her digging into all the genealogy stuff, you can understand what kind of woman she was. And so then my daughter got a lot of that too. And she's very proudly bilingual and wonderful and very aware culturally. But then I had my granddaughter. And my granddaughter...
Even more important, right? Oh, God.
my goodness. And so when people ask me why I do what I do, it's because I want her to know all these wonderful things. There is a really good chance she's not going to pick it up in school.
Yes.
Although she is
Even now.
thankfully in a dual language school and doing very good there. But I know she is aware because she hears all the stories. She's around it all the time. She's immersed in it. And it's very important because she is now grounded. Okay. And I know this because, and I want to get a close up.
Oh, there she is.
She's talking. She's been hearing, we did a chocolate gala. So she heard all the stories about the cacao and the chocolate comes from cacao and so forth. And how it was the Aztecs actually who turned around and fermented it and made it the way we like to drink it, you know, in chocolate. So she knows all these stories. And her mother was doing the activity center where everybody was tasting the real cacao to see, you know, that it's not chocolate yet. but she had been hearing these stories all months, okay? So then the photographer captured her telling
this
the little boy. And it's a series of pictures. And as you see, she starts off very, you know, straight up, and then she leans in, and then she picks up the beans, and then she gets in there, and then his reaction. That's why I do what I do.
Absolutely.
Because I know she's going to tell this story for the rest of her life. Okay?
Right.
It is something that is a part of her. She says, cacao is in my blood. Y te habla español y inglés. And she reads in both languages. So, you know, I can't ask, you know, this is what I want for all of my fabuelas that have, you know, that they are able to pass that on to the next generation.
Becky, I know
and
you
the
have
one
a
after
similar
that.
story too.
I think we all do. For me, it's always been about how people pronounce your name and the pride associated and what that does for your identity. And the first time that we did the Milagros exhibit was on the mall in Washington, D.C. in 1996 when Stand for Children was created. And Marian Wright Edelman asked me if I would create a Latino something for all these many
And tell us who
activities.
Marian was.
Oh, so Marian Wright Edelman is one of the great leaders and advocates for children's rights in the
nationally.
United States. And she
African
headed up-
American
yes.
and just a boss.
And yes, really amazing woman. And she runs the Children's Defense Fund. That was the first real powerful lobbyist organization for
That's
young
right.
people. And at the time, I had been on the board of directors of the National Association for Education of Young Children. I was elected, believe it or not, one of the first Latinas to be elected to that board because it represents all of the early childhood teachers of the country. So, you know, there was always this question of, okay, you're pushing for this Latino stuff. Are you trying to get a piece of our action? Or are you just going to make the pie bigger? You know, there was always this give and take with the African American advocates for children as well. So we joined forces every time that we could. And that event, the Stand for Children on the mall in Washington, D.C., in mid-90s was to draw attention to the ABC bill for child care. And so that was really the turning point for mothers being able to work because child care vouchers and resources would be expanded in the United States. I mean, 25 years ago, that was still something we didn't just find easily. Anyway, so we created this exhibit of the Milagros because it was the most Mexican thing I could think of. And the name I came up with was Milagros Are Dreams for the Future. And thousands of kids made Milagros and hung them up on a little display that we created out of PVC pipe in the floor at Home Depot. We bought the pipe, they helped us cut it, and we built a tower, and then we filled it with these Milagros, and they sat on the grounds at the mall in Washington during that amazing march for children. And then after that, they were in the Capitol, they were in the White House, they've circulated, and we've been making milagros ever since. And so I wanted to share a couple of them with you because they're very moving.
And while milagros can be these silver-plated, lovely little artifacts and things that you hang on necklaces or put on altars.
You take to the church and you
right.
It's a little leg because my rodilla hurts, you know.
And this is done on construction paper and made more accessible. So read some.
So yes, whereas historically it's a petition that you're asking for your favorite saint or whoever. It's a very Latin American tradition. And so these kids, their petitions are different. This one says,
their wishes, their
I
dreams.
want my grandma to come back to Texas.
Oh, yeah.
So there has to be a story behind that. We don't know who it is, what age they are.
Beautiful.
But it'll be hanging on our exhibit this year. And we hope that the exhibit will travel throughout the library system here in San Antonio because they're very keen to help us do it. This one says, Yo deseo que no vendan pistolas. I wish that they wouldn't sell guns. And it's signed by Jonathan. We don't know how old he is, what school he goes to, but that's his.
He produced it at a festival.
At one of our festivals. We've been doing these at all the festivals for years.
Oh, this one says, so bless his heart.
I wish to pass the 5th grade.
I hope he did.
I hope he did.
I hope all kids do.
This one really is touching. It's got a lot of stickers on it, and then in tiny little pencil letters, like if it's almost a secret, it says, "I wish I had a dad." You just don't know and. Why did it take this little piece of paper to express this feeling? And
almost so that no one would see it.
No name or anything. Well, it says Chris, but we don't know anything about Chris.
Yeah.
So to get really serious about this, during COVID, we wanted to make sure we didn't have a year that went by without milagros. And so we approached our friends at Mi Tierra, and the Cortez family was so excited with this idea that we made 500 of these little kits.
And they were gone very fast because I didn't get one.
They were gone.
2 nights.
Yeah. And so the kit gives you the history of what is a milagro, how it's a historic, thing that the Spaniards did, and that it's a petition, a prayer for something that you wish for in the future, and that you can make your own. And then on the back, and there's a couple of pictures of this is a picture from that day at the Capitol with thousands of them on there. And then inside, of course, you have all the little props that you need.
So instead of getting a coloring book when they come into the restaurant, they got a kit. And while you're waiting for your food, you can do
We need to get some money for that to be replicated.
This is very, it's a wonderful, I love doing this, but the miraculous thing about it is when you read what these kids are writing, and you compare that to research that's been done, like Kids Count, and they tell you, we want to know, how this percentage kids are concerned about bullying, this percentage of kids are concerned about gun violence, this percentage of kids, don't have enough food to eat, this percentage of kids is not back. You name a topic, Kids Count will find out that. But what is really wonderful is that when you read these milagros, they give you the same kind of ratio.
It's a reflection.
Of ideas. Mm-hmm. It truly is. These kids are telling us what it is.
They're living.
They fall into family. They fall into neighborhood. They fall into aspirations. I want to be an engineer. The one I love, I wish we had to show it to you, is I want to be an anesthesiologist, and it took a long time to figure out that word.
Wow.
Because it's
so
very inventive spelling, too. And you get a couple, like I want a pet unicorn, or I wish they'd stop killing pandas. I think those are the only 2 that I've found. But most of them are very concrete. So these kids are aware, and we need to fix it. We need to give them a boost.
Yeah.
We're running out of time, Becky, and I want you to close this out. I've been following you and your travel buddy here, going through Mexico and Latin America, and I want you to reflect on that and how that has informed your work as a child advocate.
Well, it truly is. I think that the gift that Merri and I have is that we can take something that's very complex and present it to families and children in a way that's easy for them to understand. We write directly to them in their language, not in an academic.
We think like a 3-year-old.
We don't. Well, we're not writing like academics when we're presenting for the public. So in our work, I mean, from the very first time that we traveled together, I think in 2000, we went to visit in Oaxaca where they were dyeing threads with cochineal, which comes from the cactus. Now, I've seen that little white stuff growing on prickly pear
The fungus.
all my life. I didn't know it was a little bug. I didn't know that they could dry it and that they would grind it and that it would become a dye. And that there were these natural dyes that were used all over this land, you know.
And it's very typical of the clothing that you see. A lot of things are in that color.
Those things.
And
so having that experience, we were just fascinated by that. And of course, we brought back hand-dyed rugs and all of those pieces. But it stayed in my mind. And people would ask me about things and I would say, oh, yeah, well, this belongs to this and this came from that and this is how it's made. And, you know, I think I bought one of these at that time on that trip. So that's why they're a little beat up over the years. But the kids loved to hold them and everything. And we talked about what an alebrije was and how it started with the Linares family. And
now they all know it because of Coco.
Yeah. But the general public would say, well, that's an interesting kind of folk artsy thing. It's not even well made. No, it's hand carved. And it's a tradition passed down from one generation to another for centuries. And
see,
so
this is what we give the kids. This is your palette. And then we show them about the kind of alebrije style.
Oh, that's
and
beautiful.
then this is what they produce.
that's one of their,
You know? So, I mean, they're learning these things. It'll stay with them.
When we go and visit artisans and we see them working, whether it's someone who makes things or someone who grows things and prepares wonderful food, we learn from that. It feels like it's something we felt in our heart. We didn't know that we knew it and that we loved it, but as soon as you connect with it, it's culturally yours,
Yes.
and you know it. And then I just want to share that with all the kids because no one did that for me except for my parents. And so I was confident because they would say, you have a rich history. Your family can do this. Your family did this. Your family, you know, your grandfather wrote a song for the Revolucion, you know, and it was very famous. And it's on the backside of the national anthem on a CD, you know, on a record.
Oh, that's
and you hear
awesome.
things like that and you feel that's what makes you feel your identity and who you are. And once you know who you are,
You
then
can do anything.
It gives you strength.
It gives you confidence. It gives you that sense of, I can speak up and
I
do
can.
something that's different.
right.
It doesn't matter that I'm
and
told
it
not
removes
to.
any of the shame
Exactly.
of you can't speak Spanish. It removes so many negatives. And this is a lesson that we need to teach again and again. And I thank you for coming on and teaching
Come to
us.
the festival.
Come to the
May 6th,
festival.
10
May
to 2.
6th.
Come early, bring your kids. It's all free. Parents walk out with armloads of
And
stuff.
it's
Things
Plaza Guadalupe on the west side, right near
May 6th.
the church, right near the theater. It's it's a historic part of town.
Yes.
Thank you so much. And thank you everybody out in podcast land for joining us.